Welcome back, my friend. If you've ever felt like you're constantly giving, constantly bending, constantly trying to be the nice one, this episode is for you. If you've ever silenced your own needs just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable, you're not alone. So many of us, especially women, were raised to be agreeable, sweet, and selfless. We were taught that being kind makes us good, that putting others first makes us worthy. But what if I told you that kind of kindness is slowly erasing who you really are? Today, we're diving into the powerful truth about kindness, self-respect, and the difference between people-pleasing and true inner peace. This is the kind of conversation that might feel uncomfortable at first, but I promise, it's the one that will set you free. So take a breath, settle in, because we're about to unlearn the performance and remember your power. Most women are taught early on that kindness is everything. We're told to smile more, speak softer, give others the benefit of the doubt, and always be the bigger person. And yes, kindness, in its purest form, is beautiful, but somewhere along the way, that pure kindness became distorted. It became something else, something exhausting, something dangerous, because when kindness is no longer a choice but a conditioned reflex, when it means betraying yourself just to keep others comfortable, that's not kindness. That's self-erasure. We don't talk enough about the emotional toll of constantly putting yourself last. The quiet pain of always saying yes when your soul is begging you to say no. The invisible wounds you carry when you give chance after chance to people who haven't even earned your time, let alone your forgiveness. This isn't strength. This isn't grace. This isn't compassion. It's emotional survival. It's a performance scripted by a society that told you being a good woman means being small, agreeable, and easy to manage. But what if I told you the strongest thing you could ever do is tell the truth, even when your voice shakes? What if real kindness starts with you? What if kindness doesn't mean saying yes to everything, but having the courage to say no to what no longer honors you? Because here's the hard truth. We've been conditioned to believe that keeping others happy is our highest duty, that avoiding conflict is noble, that being liked equals being safe. But that's a lie, and it's a lie that's kept too many of us trapped in relationships, jobs, conversations, and identities that don't reflect who we truly are. The real danger isn't in saying no, it's in always saying yes. So let's get real. The moment you start saying yes when you actually mean no, the moment you ignore that tight knot in your stomach that signals something's off, you're not being kind, you're abandoning yourself. You're putting someone else's comfort above your own truth, and the world will praise you for it. They'll call you generous, they'll call you understanding, but they won't see the invisible cost. The sleepless nights, the bottled up frustration, the slow erosion of your identity. And the worst part? You'll start believing you're doing the right thing. You'll convince yourself that being accommodating is love, that being endlessly forgiving is loyalty, that staying quiet is maturity. But beneath that polished exterior, something inside you is screaming. Because deep down, you know, this isn't right. You were never meant to make yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. You weren't put here to constantly explain yourself, justify your needs, or apologize for your boundaries. But if no one ever taught you that your needs matter, how could you believe it? Think about how often you've said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. How many times you've brushed off disrespect because you didn't want to make things awkward? How many times you've tolerated being treated like an afterthought, just so you wouldn't seem difficult? That's not humility. That's self-sacrifice. And it's not sustainable. Every time you prioritize being nice over being honest, you chip away at your self-respect. And without self-respect, kindness becomes nothing more than performance. You're not choosing kindness. You're choosing fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being left. Fear of being labeled too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But here's what no one tells you. Real kindness isn't about never making waves. It's not about staying quiet when your heart wants to scream. Real kindness is rooted in confidence, not compliance. It starts from within. It says, I can love you and still say no. I can care deeply and still walk away. I can be kind and still choose myself. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if your kindness came from confidence, not fear? What if your kindness began with being kind to yourself first? That would mean honoring your limits without guilt, speaking up even when your voice trembles, saying no without needing to explain, walking away from people and situations that drain your soul, even if they call you dramatic, selfish, or cold. Because listen, being kind does not mean becoming a doormat. It does not mean tolerating disrespect because he's going through a rough time. It doesn't mean staying silent so someone else can feel comfortable in their carelessness. You are not a therapist for someone who only calls when they're in crisis. You are not a rehabilitation center for emotionally unavailable men. You are not required to absorb the pain of people who refuse to heal themselves. Your time, your energy, your love, these are not infinite resources. They are sacred, and it's time you started treating them that way. There's this dangerous myth floating around that if you're just nice enough, patient enough, understanding enough, eventually someone will wake up and value you. That if you stay soft, stay small, stay agreeable, people will love you more. But that's not how respect works. You don't earn it by being easy. You don't earn it by shrinking yourself. You earn it by having standards and holding the line, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. And here's what happens when you start doing that. At first, it feels wrong. Your body rebels. Guilt creeps in. You question yourself. You wonder if you're being cruel. You wonder if you're asking for too much. That's not your intuition speaking. That's your conditioning. That's the residue of years spent learning that your job is to keep everyone else happy, even if it costs you your peace. But let me say this as clearly as I can. Speaking up is not rude. Having standards is not mean. Saying no is not selfish. These are not the traits of someone who's hard to love. They're the traits of someone who finally loves herself enough to stop handing out her energy like it's free samples at a store. So the next time you feel that familiar urge to excuse someone's bad behavior, to rationalize that he didn't mean it, or maybe I'm just being too sensitive, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, am I being kind, or am I abandoning myself again? Because real kindness, the kind that's rooted in self-respect, has boundaries. It has clarity, it has strength, and yes, it may cost you certain people, but it will never cost you yourself. And here's the paradox no one talks about. When you stop being overly kind to people who haven't earned it, you begin to command a deeper kind of respect, not just from them, but from yourself. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You attract differently. You stop chasing people who never had the capacity to see you in the first place. Respect isn't something you toss around like confetti. It's not automatic. It's not owed just because someone shows up. And yet, so many women have been conditioned to give it freely, to fathers, to teachers, to boyfriends, to bosses, regardless of how those people treat them. We're told to respect men by default. It's embedded in every corner of culture. But here's the quiet truth no one says out loud. Respect is not about gender. It's about character. It's about consistency, integrity, empathy. It's about how someone carries themselves when no one is watching. How they treat others when they have nothing to gain. That's what earns respect, not charm, not good looks, not clever words or the illusion of kindness wrapped in manipulation. And certainly not some empty title or status. But when you don't know your own worth, you hand out respect like it's free. You lower the bar so far down just to make others feel tall. And when you do that, when you reward someone with your loyalty, your trust, your emotional labor, without asking if they've earned it, you send a quiet message. You don't have to show up for me. I'll give you the best of me anyway. And when people learn that, they stop trying. Why would they show up fully when they can show up halfway and still get access to your heart? That's the trap. You give more, hoping they'll rise. They give less, knowing they don't have to. And slowly, your boundaries erode, your voice fades, Your needs get pushed further and further down the list until you don't recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. It's a painful realization, isn't it, that in trying so hard to be enough for someone else, you slowly forgot what it felt like to be enough for yourself. You lowered your standards in hopes they'd rise. You gave more in hopes they'd finally notice. You tolerated, explained, waited, forgave, all because you believed that if you were just kind enough, patient enough, good enough, then they'd change. Then they'd show up. Then they'd love you the way you needed. But that's not how real love works. That's not how real respect is built. Respect isn't inspired by you loving harder while they give you less. It's not earned by proving your worth to people who aren't even trying to see it. And you don't teach someone how to value you by continuing to accept the bare minimum. That's not empowerment. That's exhaustion disguised as hope. So what's the way out? It starts by flipping the script. By refusing to engage with people who don't meet your baseline. By understanding that clarity is not cruelty. That having standards isn't about being better than anyone, it's about being honest about what you need. And no longer apologizing for it. It's about saying, I'm no longer available for one-sided effort. I'm no longer shrinking to make room for people who never considered my space. You don't need to be angry to set boundaries. You don't need to yell to walk away. You don't need to explain why your soul no longer fits in a dynamic that was never built to hold it. You just need to get clear. Clear about who belongs in your life. Clear about what kind of energy gets access to your time. Clear about what behavior is no longer acceptable, even if it once was. Because growth doesn't mean holding on tighter. It means letting go with grace. We've all been guilty of putting people on pedestals simply because they were charming or charismatic. But charm is not character. Words are not actions. And promises mean nothing without consistency. Being a good guy, in theory, is meaningless if he's careless in practice. So don't fall for the fantasy. Don't mistake potential for presence. Don't cling to the idea of who someone could be, while ignoring who they actually are. The truth is, when you stop giving respect automatically, when you stop defaulting to love and loyalty without discernment, something powerful happens. You begin to observe, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You start noticing how people respond when you say, no. Do they listen, or dismiss? Do they honor your boundaries, or push back with guilt? Do they stay present, or vanish until it's convenient again? And from that place of stillness and observation, you stop being reactive and start being intentional. You stop pouring into what leaks. You stop chasing what withdraws. You stop giving your best to people who don't even value the bare minimum. And you realize, you've had the power all along. The moment you hold yourself to a higher standard, your entire life begins to align. It's not magic, it's maturity. It's the quiet, daily decision to stop betraying yourself. To stop explaining away red flags. To stop calling disrespect just a phase. When you respect yourself, you move differently. You no longer explain your worth, you embody it. And that's when the world starts to shift in your favor. And here's something nobody talks about enough. Self-respect is quiet. But it speaks volumes. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be shouted or posted on social media. It simply shows up in your decisions. In the way you carry yourself. In the way you remove yourself from rooms where you're not seen. In the way you stop fighting for connection where there is no effort in return. Because when you truly respect yourself, you stop begging for clarity. You stop asking for crumbs and calling it a meal. You stop allowing inconsistency to feel like passion. You stop entertaining people who only come around when they're bored or lonely or in need. You stop answering calls from people who have made it clear, through patterns, not words, that they don't deserve your time. You begin to show yourself loyalty. You begin to stand on your own emotional feet. You begin to say, this is what I need, and if it makes you uncomfortable, that's not my responsibility to fix. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. That's choosing to no longer participate in your own mistreatment. And you'll start noticing something remarkable. The same people who once took your silence for submission, who once fed off your willingness to overgive, they begin to fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because you no longer make it easy for them to stay. Because you've stopped lowering yourself to meet people who've never once tried to rise. This is not bitterness. This is evolution. Now let's talk boundaries. Real boundaries. Not the kind you whisper. Not the kind you write down but never enforce. I mean the kind that are felt in your presence. The kind that don't require confrontation, because they're already clear in your energy. Your tone. Your choices. Most people think boundaries are about pushing people away. But that's not it. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors, with locks. With keys. With selective access. They're how you teach the world how to treat you. They're how you protect your inner peace without apology. And here's the secret. The people who truly love you, who truly care for your well-being, they'll adjust. They won't guilt you. They won't gaslight you. They'll say, "Thank you for telling me what you need." They'll respect the door, the lock, the key, because they respect you. But the people who get angry at your boundaries, the ones who push back, the ones who suddenly say, "You've changed," they're the ones who benefited from you not having any. And when you finally stop playing the role they wrote for you, their discomfort speaks volumes. That discomfort is not your cue to shrink. It's your signal that you're doing the right thing. You were never meant to be someone's emotional cushion. You were never meant to carry the full weight of a relationship on your back while they coast. Boundaries are the end of that era. They are the sacred line that says, "I will not be used. I will not be drained. I will not be confused into staying where I am not valued." And here's something powerful. Boundaries don't just protect you from others, they also build trust with yourself. Every time you enforce one, no matter how small, you're telling yourself, "I've got you." You're showing up for your own peace. And that internal loyalty, it compounds. Over time, it becomes the root of your confidence. You stop walking on eggshells, second-guessing everything you say. You stop contorting yourself to fit into spaces never built to hold your truth. You stop apologizing for needing space, for needing clarity, for needing more, because more isn't too much when it's what your soul genuinely requires. And yes, when you first start setting those boundaries, it feels like a rebellion. Because for years, maybe decades, you were taught that saying no is rude, that drawing lines is selfish, that taking space means you're cold. But the truth? The only thing colder is living a life that constantly neglects you, while calling it keeping the peace. Because peace without authenticity is just quiet suffering. We were not meant to live on autopilot, nodding along while we bleed inside. We weren't put here to be emotional sponges, absorbing every ounce of toxicity, guilt, or passive aggression in our environments. And we definitely weren't born to teach grown people the basics of decency at the cost of our mental health. The more you honor your own boundaries, the more the world begins to adjust. Not instantly, not always gracefully, but it does, because people begin to understand. You are no longer available for the bare minimum. And here's something else. Setting boundaries doesn't just change your relationships, it changes your standards. You no longer entertain people who breadcrumb you just enough to keep you hoping. You no longer respond to texts that show up only when they need something. You don't rearrange your life for those who treat your time like an afterthought. You stop seeking closure from people who gave you chaos. You stop opening your heart to those who only loved the version of you that stayed quiet, agreeable, and easy. You realize that you were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who wanted you to be less. And from that realization, you rise. You become someone who commands space without saying a word. Someone whose no doesn't shake. Whose silence feels strong. Whose presence says, "I don't beg. I don't chase. I choose." And when you live from that place, everything begins to align. Not just relationships, but the way you think, speak, move, rest. You start making decisions not from desperation, but from discernment. You no longer ask, "Will they stay if I'm real?" Instead, you ask, "Do I even want to give them access to the real me?" And here's the breakthrough moment, the one that quietly shifts your entire reality. It's when you stop asking, Am I good enough for them? And you start asking, are they even good for me? That simple shift changes the way you show up in every relationship. Every conversation, every room. You're no longer operating from a place of scarcity, from fear of losing people who were never fully present anyway. You're operating from wholeness, and when you're whole, you don't chase, convince, or negotiate your value. You become the standard. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your world, not because you're arrogant, but because you've worked too hard to create peace within yourself. And protecting that peace becomes non-negotiable. You stop asking people to treat you better. You simply walk where you are treated with care. You stop explaining why you need space, why you're drawing boundaries, why your energy feels sacred now. You no longer justify your evolution. You just embody it. And yes, there will be people who don't like it. People who were only ever comfortable with the version of you that tolerated the intolerable. People who thrived when you were quiet, when you overextended, when you said, yes, at your own expense. They'll call you distant. They'll say you've changed. And they're right, you have. But what they don't realize is, you've changed for yourself, not against them. You've stopped editing your essence to make others feel more comfortable. You've stopped watering yourself down to keep the peace. You've stopped offering a discount version of your soul just to avoid conflict. That's not selfish. That's sacred. You begin to realize that protecting your peace sometimes means letting go silently. No drama, no explanations, just distance, just clarity, just a quiet exit from what once felt like home but had become a battlefield. And that silence? It speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. You don't owe access to people just because they used to have it. You don't owe forgiveness to those who repeat patterns. You don't owe comfort to those who exploited your kindness. What you do owe is honesty. To yourself, to your future, to the version of you that's been waiting for you to stop surviving and start choosing. Choosing peace over performance. Choosing truth over tolerance. Choosing boundaries over burnout. Choosing yourself, not as a last resort, but as the first priority. That's what healing looks like. That's what self-respect sounds like. It's not always loud. Sometimes, it's just a whisper that says, no more. And that whisper becomes your compass, your shield, your power. And now, we arrive at the part that most people run from, the part where you finally choose yourself. Not as a backup plan. Not because they pushed you away. Not because you have something to prove. But because you're done asking the world for permission to be whole. You're done waiting to be chosen. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to be valued by someone who doesn't even value themselves. You're done molding yourself into something digestible for people with no appetite for truth. You're done performing niceness while bleeding inside. You're done bending until your spine aches, your heart cracks, and your silence screams. Because now, you remember who you are. And no, that doesn't mean you're always confident, always fearless, always loud. Sometimes it means you're simply rooted. Rooted in your truth. Rooted in your standards. Rooted in a version of yourself that doesn't chase love but embodies it. That doesn't wait for respect but commands it. That no longer looks outside for approval. Because everything you've ever needed was inside you all along. So what's the lesson? The lesson is this. You were never too emotional. You were never too intense. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. You were simply offering your depth to those who couldn't swim. You were simply waiting for someone to meet you where you already stood, and now. Finally, you've stopped waiting. You've built a home inside yourself. And now? Now the only people who get to enter are the ones who knock with care, speak with clarity, and stay with consistency. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It's sacred. It's the moment you stop apologizing for needing more. It's when you stop watering yourself down for shallow people. It's when you say, I am no longer available for half love, half effort, or half respect. From now on, access to you must be earned. Your peace is the prize, not the compromise. Your presence is a privilege, not a placeholder. And your worth? It's not up for debate. Let them call you too much. Let them walk away. The right ones won't be intimidated by your fullness. they'll honor it, and more importantly, so will you.